Andrew, Small Business Advisors. You can check us out at www.thomas-andrew.org. Operational strength is a virtue. It is a mega important virtue. When your organization has fairly rigid standards, expectations, processes, and goals, your chances of success are greatly amplified. Now, it's not a guarantee that you're going to succeed, but your chances are greatly amplified when you have these things put into place. And this video really isn't intended to be a complaint session, because we don't talk about our clients, and the case study we're talking about today is not a client. They should have been. In fact, I was a client of theirs. As you know, Thomas Andrew works with a fair number of construction-oriented companies. Not exclusively, but we do have a number of clients that are in the construction industry, whether they be general contractors, remodelers, some subcontractors, and the like. Earlier this year, we decided that we were going to renovate a couple of bathrooms in our 23-year-old home. Went through the typical processes, got a number of bids, vetted some companies, figured out kind of what they were all about, and decided on one. And this particular team was very enthusiastic, very energetic. When they came to bid the project, and I'm really not sure at this point how they even came up with their bid, but when they came to bid the project, they brought 4 or 5 individuals. And that gets some wheel spinning. If they're sending that many people just to bid the project, we're probably going to have a couple of bathrooms full of individuals that are going to be able to knock this thing out pretty darn quick. So we hired this company. They were enthusiastic. They exuded excellence. They exuded that they knew what they were doing. And before I get into this, and again, this really isn't a complaint session. This is more of a lessons learned. And if you're in the contracting business, this is a great thing for you to hear as well. Or even if you're contemplating hiring a remodeling company or a contractor, these are some things to think about. But before we get into it, I do want to say a couple of things. One, we did end up with 2 great-looking bathrooms at the end of this project. The project was 60 days late. The project was at least on my budget. I don't know how they fared financially out of this deal. I think we'll have some clues to that as this conversation goes on. And I also want to say that the labor, they did not provide me with a ton of labor. There were many more people here to do the estimate than were to actually do the physical project. But the individual, the one person that they provided me for the labor, was absolutely exceptional, did top quality work, an absolute gentleman, and I did not mind him being in my home for that extended period of time. So to get that out of the way, we did end up with 2 great bathrooms, and the laborer was absolutely wonderful and magnificent, and he should probably start his own company and follow his own dream sometime soon as well. But anyway, this company, they provided some great design services. They came up with some ideas for these bathrooms that we hadn't contemplated, provided exceptional design services, some concepts and whatnot. But right off the bat, one of the project managers mentioned to me, I really wish we didn't do design services. And I'm thinking to myself, holy smokes, man, you subcontract everything out. But for design services, you literally provide no value. So that was a bit of a red flag that they didn't understand where their economic engine came from, or they didn't understand what their firm was good at. And you've got to know that before you go anywhere, before you even come up with a company name. What are we going to be good at? And in this case, it's design services, but they didn't uniformly recognize that that was one of their skills. There were virtually 0 project management skills. The project management team didn't really oversee labor very well, didn't really coordinate with suppliers, didn't coordinate with subcontractors that were coming in, or timelines or schedules, or even the client relationship. And that's something, when you recognize that your project is not going to be 45 days and complete, and like I said, it went on to be over 100 days, at some point before 45 days, you need to call your client and say, hey, sorry, this isn't going to happen. And sorry is not a dirty word in small business. It shows humility. It shows that you've recognized that something hasn't gone according to plan, and you regret that it didn't go according to plan. Ignoring I'm sorries simply makes tension build. So 0 project management skills. Project manager, I believe, was not from the construction industry at all, but may have been a former banker, which is a little scary because, as it turns out, maybe they're not that great with money. There were very few risk mitigation measures in place. In fact, they kind of pushed back on getting permits from the city that we happen to be within. And I hear that a lot from contractors. Well, we don't want to spend if it's a remodeling project, $400 or $500 on permits. Now, obviously, if it's a new construction, that number is going to be higher, but $400 or $500 on permits. And I said, wait a second, that's a risk mitigation strategy. Yes, it might be a hassle to go get the permit. Yes, it might be a hassle to have the city inspector come out and check out your work. But at the end of the day, that process takes weight and risk off of you, the contractor. See, when that inspector comes out, they give it the thumbs up or thumbs down. If they believe that you've done everything right, that's great. Proceed with the project. Tom gets his bathrooms back. All good. But here's the deal. On down the road, let's say I have a catastrophic electrical issue that happened in the bathrooms, or a catastrophic plumbing issue that happened in the bathrooms. Now all of a sudden that burden of litigation and liability falls onto my local municipality because they gave it the thumbs up. Without those permits, now I'm all over my contractor saying, hey, you guys screwed this up, you owe me something, we're going to court. But once the city inspector gives it the thumbs up, that liability and that risk shifts to the city because they approved the job that was done. There was zero post-construction follow-up, like 2 weeks after they move out. How about a phone call? Hey, Tom, how do you like your bathrooms? Is there anything we could have done better? Zero, and there's very little communication during the project. But the known schedule was what really got me, because it was obvious that my labor hadn't been provided a schedule. How many days for demo, how many days for hard surfaces, how many days for plumbing, how many days for electrical, how many days for paint, how many days for flooring, all that stuff. And it's not that complicated. And we spend a lot of time working with contractors to kind of teach them those methods of accurate scheduling and how to get that done. And by the way, the real beauty of that isn't knowing when that project is done. The real beauty is knowing when the labor is going to be freed up to go to the next project. And your sales department can then forecast and say, we have to have a job sold on this date so that Charlie and Jim and Susie can move from Tom's house to the next project and keep them busy. So there's absolute beauty in scheduling, which was totally lost on this one. There was also no quality control, aside from the laborer that was here, and he kind of did his own, but typically that's a project management role as well. To come in frequently, check the work. Is this up to our standards? Is this up to the client's standards? And that really didn't happen. And it finally got to a point where I said, you know, not to get out of my lane here, but this is kind of what our company does. Can I show you how to keep more of my money? They kept going back to places like, well, the big box hardware stores. You shouldn't really buy anything from the big box hardware stores. There are wholesalers that cater to the construction industry where you can actually procure materials less costly. So finally I lost my mind and kind of went off a little bit. And again, that's a bit outside of my nature, but we were in my house. And we'd gone 60 days over schedule. So everybody has their limit. And we had a lot of family things going on at the time where the project became in the way after it should have been done months before. And finally I talked to him, I said, look, I don't know your internals, I don't know your finances, I don't know your processes, I don't know how you manage people, but right now you're exhibiting all the signs of a company that has a significant cash flow problem because things weren't getting done, which typically means there's a lag in the system because somebody hasn't been paid before. By the way, cash problems are symptomatic of poor systems, like scheduling. I said, I'm happy to help you improve your stuff. And honestly, I probably would have offered to invest in the company because I saw a huge upside in what they were doing. They just needed to fix a couple of processes and systems that frankly don't cost much, if anything. It's just a matter of doing the work. So fast forward to, and this project concluded 60 days ago. So last week, I received a letter in the mail from one of their creditors that pretty much said, hey, XYZ company, whoever they are, has stiffed us for a $22,000 loan or a line of credit or whatever it was, and we want you to pick up the tab. Now, I am off the hook on this. This is simply a process that collection agencies and occasionally attorneys will send out to unrelated parties simply to turn the heat up on who their real target is. So I sent the company a note and I said, hey, what the heck is this, guys? I got this thing in the mail, identified me, identified you, says you owe them some money, what's going on? And all I got back was, we're working on it. And again, that was an opportunity for them to say, Tom, we're sorry you got a letter like this. We're working out some internal situations and it's all going to be fine. But they didn't say sorry. They just said, we're working on it. Anyway, not my problem, but whatever. So I'm more irritated that I recognize many of their operational issues and generally shared them many months ago. In fact, I actually put together a plan for them on paper showing them how to get out of the mess they're in, but they never asked for it. And, you know, it was obvious that they had deficiencies, and I told them how we could help them, and I told them it would be very low cost. I did not tell them that we would be interested in investing in their company, which would have solved their money problems months ago as well. But I gave them an offer to fix their stuff many months ago, and their impending doom was obvious. So the greatest irony right now is that one of their owners is on social media attempting to sell a book, which I assume AI wrote, about how to run a great construction company. Insanity. I'm like, dude, your company was 60 days late on my project. Who knows how deep in the financial hole on my project? You're defaulting to creditors, and now you're out peddling advice on how to run a fantastic construction company? Look, business is hard, but avoiding the work of planning and securing real predictable processes is a recipe for doom. And many who start businesses are accepting to live this way. They just hop into it and hope for the best, particularly in an industry as complicated and complex as construction or related to construction. That's absolute insanity. See, if you don't have processes, there's no predictability. Revenue, success, materials, time, if you can't or won't predict them, I can predict with 100% certainty that your customers are going to be getting a letter from one of your creditors saying you can't pay your bills. So the life lesson is businesses fail. But if you fail after truly giving it at all and approaching it with intelligence and effort, well, sometimes things don't work out. But if you're being lazy, if you're not giving it your all with intelligence, with processes and planning and strategies, then it's just pathetic and shameful, and it makes you look dumb. And I honestly can't imagine anything worse than not just failing as a company, but having a letter sent to my clients that say, I can't pay my bills, these folks aren't any good, and by the way, hope you like your bathrooms because it's probably the only thing they ever did right. And look at that a little bit further, you know, customer satisfaction. Even if they did have customers that were just absolutely on board and huge raving fans of this particular company, that's all deleted the second that you get a letter from a creditor saying, hey, these folks can't pay their bills. Now nobody's out saying, hey, you need to use XYZ contractor for your project because they did a great job for me. Now they're going to say, well, we used XYZ company and they did a great job, but they apparently don't pay their bills because I got this letter in the mail. That's shameful and embarrassing and horrific, and I literally can't think of anything worse as you kind of circle the toilet, you know, in your business because you didn't adhere to processes. If you find yourself in this situation, it's not too late. You can recover. You never fail all at once. You fail over time, and you can actually see it coming. Seek operational help. Give us a shout. We'd love to help. Despite being a little bit fired up about this particular case study because it happened to me as a client and because we offered them assistance that they did not accept, a little fired up about it, but we never demean our customers. We never demean our clients. We want to work with you to get you operationally solid and back on track. We love to see you grow. We love to see you happy. We love to see you profitable, and we love to see you successful. We work with all kinds of businesses, but we do have a bit of a specialty in the construction industry. We don't have a program called Construction Company in a Box, but almost. Every one of you are unique. Every one of you have different types of companies. But we do have a system and series of proven techniques and processes to help keep your customers happy, to help keep your projects on budget and on time. Customer complaints typically come from two things in the construction industry, those being quality and those being schedule or time. We can help you with both of those. So if any of that resonates with you, give us a shout. Check us out at www.thomas-andrew.org. As always, we'd love to be on your team.